we wanted to take this time of us all being together to talk about community and maybe like what our mindset should be as we go back out into the world. You know, I remember C.S. Lewis in The Silver Chair, Jill meets Aslan, who is the representative of Christ, and he tells her again and again, repeat what I've told you here, because it's easy to remember on the mountaintop what I've said. But when you go back into the valley, it's easy to forget. And so we want to remember what God has revealed to us here, both individually and what he has revealed to us as a community, and make sure that that community stays intact once we leave the ski top mountain of here in Wisla, right? And so we want to collaborate, not just on art, but on our purpose in Christ. We want to be a community, a body of artists. We want to be God's body of art. And so I want to discuss that today and discuss community and collaboration through the eyes of filmmaking. One, because that is the art form that I started in, was theater and film. But also because film is sort of the best representation of what it means when artists of all different types, all different mediums come together for one common purpose. So let me ask you this. What is, and I'd like to hear from, anybody can answer, but I would love to hear from some of the younger folks or those who have just been here for the first time or those who haven't had a chance to share, because us who have been here a number of years have been dominating the conversation. What is your favorite movie? No wrong answer. There are 2 or 3 wrong answers, but mostly no wrong answer.
Blade Runner.
Blade Runner, why? No, think through. Really think through. Why is it your favorite movie?
It answers core philosophical questions.
It asks philosophical questions and gives some answers. That's perfect. What's
Shrek.
Another? Shrek? Why?
Come on. Oh, yeah.
That'll do, donkey. That'll do. What?
Because it changed the rules of the Disney movie.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not a Disney, but I love how it's the impact of Shrek had on the cartoon world. Yeah.
Yeah, and it challenges what you know about stories that you've already heard, right? Yeah, what's another one? Shawshank Redemption. Why? It's deep. It's hopeful. It has depth. It makes you wrestle with things that are difficult to wrestle with. Another one, maybe? Yes?
Interstellar.
Interstellar? Why?
The relationship between dad and daughter, full of science, really.
Because you love the science and the relationship. And did you say great music?
And music.
Yeah, because music moves you, right? Amelie? Ooh, that's good. What?
Beautiful visuals, beautiful music, and I think it shows just the way of looking at words that is really very specific. Not everyone will get it, but those who get it just see the word like that.
Yeah. It speaks.
Yes.
It speaks. My favorite movie of all time, and I love movies, I watch them all the time, but my favorite is It's a Wonderful Life, starring Jimmy Stewart. And every time I go, I guess I'm not going to cry this time. I think I got it. And then weeping. And I love it because it reminds us that the smallest act has a bigger impact than we think it does in the world. And we don't know the ripples of the things that we've done. So I ask all this because you notice that there's a theme. It moved us. All of your favorite movies moved you or made you think or challenged your thinking. Right? Movies affect us. And they affect different people in different ways because there's so many different art forms that are represented in the art of filmmaking. And so we're called to do the same thing in the world. We are called to have an influence on the culture. We're called to have an influence on other people so that when they walk away from us, when they walk away from our art and who we are in Jesus Christ, they feel affected. And it can be through humor with Shrek, or it can be a deep, deep conversation about, like, Shawshank. But people should leave our presence affected because we represent a greater masterpiece in Jesus Christ. So I want to look at filmmaking from the perspective of community and collaboration and us all working towards a common goal. And you may have heard the term lights, camera, action. Now, they don't really say that anymore. That used to be how they would get going, start a scene when they were filming. Now filmmaking is like super complicated and there's a million things that have to happen. And if they turned on the lights, by the time they turned on the cameras, the lights would burn out because it takes 9 hours to set up the lights to do a movie. So they'll do like roll sound and like there's all these complicated things that have to happen at the beginning of a movie scene. But we're all familiar with the original thing that used to be said: turn on the lights, turn on the cameras, action. Well, I want to look at those three phrases in a slightly different way. When we are acting as artists, when we are doing our art, we can have one of two focuses that affect every action that we take. So as we walk through this talk, let's consider the light is Jesus Christ. We are a reflection of God's light. We are like the moon. Like so many times in film, the moon is like a symbol of beauty. But the moon doesn't have any light on its own. The moon is a reflection of the sun. So the moon is represented in film as something beautiful, but it's reflecting something else's light. And the light that we reflect in our art is Jesus Christ. And so look at this passage, John 8:12. Jesus spoke to them again and said, "I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will never walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life." And then Matthew says, "You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden." We reflect the light of Jesus Christ. And we ask ourselves, as we're doing our art and as we're collaborating with one another in community, is that our focus? Is our focus to reflect the light of Jesus Christ? If that is not our focus, it is likely the cameras. The cameras represent the danger of our own achievements. Pride, arrogance, control, winning, competition. Our achievements can put us in the center, and then that destroys us because we stop reflecting the light. We start seeking acclamation from others, approval from others. And it's not bad, of course, to win awards. It's not bad to be recognized. But is our focus, is our desire, is our hope in the light or in the cameras that are on us? Romans 12:3 says, "For by the grace given to me, I tell everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he should think." Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't think highly of yourself, because you are Imago Dei. You are a representation of Jesus Christ. But this says, don't think more highly of yourself than you should. Don't dethrone the light because of the cameras that are on you. Then Philippians 2 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility consider others as more important than yourselves." Natalie talked about art for the sake of others. Is our goal to reflect the light or to draw the cameras to ourselves? Depending on which one of those you are more focused on any given day, decides what your actions are going to be. Colossians says, "Whatever you do, do it from the heart as something done for the Lord and not for people, knowing that you will receive the reward of an inheritance from the Lord. You serve the Lord Jesus Christ." Every action that we take in this life, every stroke of our brush, every note that we put on a piece of paper, every interaction that we have with another person, every action that we take is informed by our balance between the cameras that are on us and the reflection of the light. And that speaks to what Brian talked about yesterday, about the soul and the compartments of the soul and the will and the mind and the beliefs. So are we willing to embrace our purpose as artists, collaborating in God's greater masterpiece? Our art doesn't belong to us, nor is it created in a vacuum. Everything that we do as human beings and as artists is part of the masterpiece, the greater masterpiece that God has been writing since the beginning of time. And so, the art of the body. We are God's body of art. And we're going to look very briefly at 3 areas of what it means to be the body of art. Unity, having unity of purpose under Christ, having authority and order under Christ, and community in Christ. Those are our 3 main points. I know everything else I said before was the introduction. We'll be here till 12 o'clock tonight. So as the director, now think about film, and we'll talk more about film as we go. But imagine for this talk that God is the director of the film of the universe. God, Jesus Christ, is the director of a story being performed over all eternity. And so God guides us through our art, calling us to work in community and collaboration with him to fulfill his masterpiece. Can you imagine that as an artist? One of the questions that we asked on the very first day was, name an artist of any medium that you would love to collaborate with. And the greatest artist in the world, in history, God, looks at that question, he goes, you. I want to collaborate with you. Let's do an art project together. Help me write this story. How do we embrace that as artists? Filmmaking and theater as well are a model of how we as artists should operate in the body of Christ. We are one body. For just as the body is one and has many parts, and all the parts of that body, though many, are one body, so also is Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and we were all given one Spirit to drink. Indeed, the body is not one part, but many. But then it says about Jesus, he is also the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. He is the director of this great story. He is the director. So let's go to point number 1. Unity. Unity. One vision, one purpose, one director, one team. When you watch a movie, do you get up and leave at the beginning of the credits that are like 9 minutes long, where hundreds of names scroll by, or do you sit and watch the names? Sometimes, yeah. Depends on how affected you are by the movie, right? There are hundreds of people that work on movies, and those names scroll by so fast, and even if you watch them, you're not going to recognize the names. You're not even going to be able to read them all because they go by so fast. I'm not talking about the credits at the beginning of the movie. I'm talking about all the people who work behind the scenes, who barely get any credit, except for their name that quickly scrolls by at the end. Jesus is the head. He is the director of the story. He guides us in our art to complete his greater masterpiece. Everyone's art, and I'm including the art of our lives, should funnel toward his will, his vision, his purpose. This is a list of film departments. Some of them are put together for the sake of brevity. But each one of these departments may have 100 people in them, all working to the common goal of the director, the common vision of the director. And if any one of these departments are out of whack or out of unity, the production suffers, and the movie may fail completely. Everyone is funneling their art toward the vision of the director. And none of these can be out of unity with one another. The directorial department, obviously, that's the director and his team. You may say in the early church that Jesus was the director, and then the second and first unit directors were Peter and Paul and the rest of the apostles, but all working towards the director's vision. Every one of these departments relies on the other. The production department is about leadership and planning. Think about the leadership and the planning that has to go into putting on an event like the European Leadership Forum. God puts people in place to lead and to strategize and to plan. The art department creates an environment. They build the sets. They choose the props. They do the costumes. They create an environment for people to hear the story, to see the story through sets and props and costumes. Our lives and art create an environment like that. Our art, our lives create an environment that conveys God's message or doesn't. The art department builds things. The sound department is focused on making sure the message is heard. If you're ever on a movie set, the boom operator, he's the guy that holds up the microphone over the sets, like Moses holding his staff up during the war. And like, I don't want to be stereotypical, but very often, like the boom guy is like skinny, not great posture, but his arms are jacked. Like it's completely out of proportion because he spends his whole life holding a staff over his head with a microphone so that the message can be heard. The locations department is focused on where the message is heard. These are the missionaries of filmmaking. Where is the message going to be heard? Where is the story going to be told? And food services feed the hungry. And it can be like a wide variety of food. Like I've worked on films that were like tiny, tiny budget films, and craft services or food services was like crackers and maybe cheese on the day that the star was working. And then there was one day that I worked on a television show called Law and Order, that, high budget, and they had like a carving station and someone making omelets. But they feed the hungry. All these departments come together to fulfill a greater purpose, and each part is important. Everyone is using their art, their gifts, within the framework of a greater masterpiece. Now, one of the things that we seek in art is freedom, right? We say we want to be free in our art. Does funneling toward the vision of the director break off your freedom? No, but you're working within the vision. So let me give you an example. Costume design is an incredible art. Costume design is an incredible art. But let's say that the director happens to be making a science fiction film. If the costume designer goes, well, I'm glad that this is a science fiction film, but I really love the Victorian age, so I'm going to make all the costumes Victorian dresses. Does that serve the purpose of the director or the story? No, you can't. Have you seen the Enterprise doors? You can't fit a Victorian dress through those swishy doors on a spaceship. You are not inhibited in your art. The director and the other departments don't try to control the costume designer, but the costume designer has a dedication to fulfill the vision of the director. So yes, we have freedom in our art, but we also are moving towards a common goal, a common story that's being told. It doesn't hinder your freedom in art. It gives your art purpose. So let me ask this very quickly, a little bit of scene work. How can we align our personal artistic vision more fully with God's greater purpose and masterpiece? Yeah, you can't, that's an excellent point. So he said, if you didn't hear, he said reading scriptures is the starting point and getting inspiration from that. So in our analogy, isn't that the same as meeting with the director? Meeting with the director and saying, what is your vision? And how can I get in line with it? That's excellent, excellent. Someone else?
Finding out what team we belong to.
Yes, say more about that. Finding out what team we belong to. Go ahead.
It's just find out what our gifts are and how we can serve.
Mm-hmm. So, like we took it down, but that list of departments. Which department is God putting you in? Where do you work best? How can you best serve the story? Excellent.
Yeah, don't put me on the boom.
Don't put you on the boom, right? Natalie can't hold this up. We know from the song that was written about her, she is the guiding light. She is not the boom operator. Right?
Meeting with the other departments, so to know what doors the enterprise will have, to know what they're going to wear when they're ordered.
That's exactly right. Meeting with the other departments so that the people building the enterprise door and the people building the costumes know that they're not going to contradict one another. Those are called production meetings, right, in film. But we call it community. That's exactly right. Very good. So that's the sense of unity. We all have a purpose, and it's all feeding into the director's vision. The second thing, which is a little bit harder, is authority. Authority, submission, and order. Servant leadership, order, and submission. Obey your leaders and submit to them, since they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account, so that they can do this with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable to you. As artists, sometimes we struggle with the idea of authority and coming under what someone else is calling us to do, even God, but especially other people in community. But everyone is placed under authority of someone else. Jesus Christ, the firstborn, the one through whom everything was created, submitted himself to the Father. So how can we say, I should not have to submit? I should not be under authority because my art deserves freedom. Jesus was perfect, and he submitted to the Father. And on a film set, everyone is placed under the authority of someone else so that they can learn and grow and get the work done. Now, the first assistant director is not the director. It's not his vision. It's not his story. But the first assistant director is given authority to run the set. Not the director, not his vision, but he oversees the mission. And everyone follows the order of the days based on what the first assistant director tells them, or things go horribly awry. He's the one that sets the pace. He's the one, or she, sets the order of the day and how we're going to do things. And he's the one that says quiet on set, and he's the one that can kick you off set. Sometimes you're called to be the first assistant director and run things for the director, but not always. Sometimes you're under the authority of someone. Sasha? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. Everyone, no matter how old you are or how young you are, needs a mentor that guides you and to help you fulfill your purpose. Everyone needs a first assistant director in their lives that helps guide them through their days. And sometimes you need to be a first assistant director for someone else. Sometimes God places you in the position of servant leadership. And sometimes God asks you to respond to a servant leader. The second unit director, which I've been both the first assistant director on a movie and second assistant director. Second assistant director is a little bit more like a missionary who is sent out to do all the second unit filmmaking. Second unit is all the stuff that is not with the stars and not with the acting, but are vitally important to the storytelling. One of Kubrick's great movies, The Shining, not a Christian film, starts with this long tracking shot of a car going through the mountains of Colorado, and it sets the mood of the story. That's filmed by second unit. When you see an establishing shot, you know, when you watch a sitcom or any other movie, before it jumps into the scene, and if you haven't noticed this before, make note of it next time you watch a movie. You will see an establishing shot, what's called an establishing shot, of the outside of a building or a park before it goes inside and starts the scene. Do you know why that is? Because film jumps around, and if you don't have an establishing shot, it creates an unsettledness in you because you don't know where you are. So sometimes if you're doing a thriller, you will purposefully leave out establishing shots and cut to keep you, as you're watching, to be unsettled because the director wants you to be unsettled. But if there's going to be peace, there has to be an establishing shot. Sometimes we need an establishing shot. Sometimes we're cutting, go scene to scene to scene to scene to scene to scene, and we never take time for the director to show us where we are. That's what the second unit director does, all these shots of the buildings. Are you in a season in your life where you need to stop and ask God for an establishing shot so that you know where you are? Being under authority means submission to the director's plan and the schedule, not being in control. When you're on a film set, we have these things called call sheets. And the call sheet gets put under the door of all the actors and the crew at like 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, after the first assistant director makes a plan for the next day. And you may think you know what you're doing tomorrow, but until that call sheet comes, you don't know. Sometimes God is going to change your plan. He's going to ask you to submit to it. He's going to ask you to submit to his authority or somebody else's authority as you wait for instructions. And sometimes those instructions, those call sheets come at the very last minute. And sometimes your pages change. If anyone ever tries to sell you an original movie script that was used on the set and it's all white pages, they're scamming you. Because all the time they're rewriting the story. And the way that they keep track of making sure everybody has the most up-to-date script is with colored pages. Did you get the green pages, Brian? Your story has changed. And so when you see a final script, it's got all different color pages. So you can know that you have the most up-to-date script. One time I was doing a movie called Killer Flood, terrible movie, but it was my biggest role. And they send the dailies to the producers, the people with the money, and let them look at the scenes that have been shot that previous day. Well, for whatever reason, not because of anything special about me, but for whatever reason, they didn't like the guy that was playing the sheriff. I was playing the lovable but bumbling town deputy. And for whatever reason, they didn't like the guy playing the sheriff, and they did like what I was doing. And so they said, write out the sheriff and give all those lines to the deputy. And so I came on set the next morning. I didn't look at my green pages. And everyone's like, congratulations, Josh. Did you read the green pages? The story had changed. Sometimes God's going to change your story. He's going to change your lines. Sometimes your role might get bigger in a certain scene. Other times it might get smaller. Are you going to submit to that? Being under authority means not being the center of attention. Being okay with being in the end credits instead of the opening credits. Being an extra. An extra are the people that don't talk when you go into a restaurant scene and there's people in the background. When you get distracted by what an extra is doing in the background, they're not doing their job. Their job is to set an environment, not draw attention to themselves. And sometimes that's what we're called to do. All the movies that I was not in, all the movies I was in, about a dozen movies, were terrible. Please don't watch them. And some of them I had fairly big parts. But I would give up all of that to be an extra in a movie like Shawshank Redemption or It's a Wonderful Life that has meaning and purpose. That's much better than being a lead in a terrible made-for-television movie about a flood. So here's our next question. Why do you think God values structure and submission within the creative process? Or do you disagree with that? Why do you think, or not, God values structure and submission within the creative process? And what does it mean to take a supporting role? Couple thoughts. Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to fight against, right? So Steve is saying that for the visual artists, sometimes they work alone for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then we lift up as a society that genius. Well, that's the cameras, right? Now, yes, there is genius. Levy is genius. Come on, he says. There's much genius. Rodik, I'm going to invite you up at the end to comment on that.
He's just a human.
He is just a human. And just a man. I've heard that as well. Less than a man. No, we don't minimize our genius. We don't minimize our art. The point is not so much working in a department. That's an analogy for who are we as a community, right? So yes, a visual artist may work alone for months, but what's his or her motivation? That's what we're trying to get at. And then when we are together, how are we building one another up? How are we communicating with one another? How are we supporting one another? So yeah, even in filmmaking, there's long hours where each department and each individual is working by themselves, and then they come back together. That's what we're trying to get at. Any other thoughts? Which is the next point that we're going to get to, actually. Yes? Yeah, that's exactly right. So God is a community himself, right? He models that for us in the Trinity. And then he grows our character. I love that. Yes, it works in structure. He builds in, he's a God of order, right? When we were talking about, when Andrew Fellows was here, and we were talking about how the artist creates form, but then we were talking about it's geometric, right? There's order to it. Even as you take from nothing, as God took from nothing and he created form, he did that geometrically. He created order out of chaos. That's exactly right. Did I see Sandy's hand back there? Ah, very good. So we have agreement. So the third point is community. Encouraging and building one another up. And this will speak to what you were saying, Steve. Encouraging and building one another up. We have to avoid competition. I am terrible at this. I compare myself to everyone. I'm constantly having to have a first assistant director remind me that I'm not in competition with people. I worked on a couple of films as a stunt apprentice. And at the time that I was working as a stunt apprentice, I was talking to the chief stunt officer and safety officer, Chuck Borden, who is from the Netherlands, good friend of mine. And I still communicate with him. He puts fascinating things on Instagram. If you want to follow him, Chuck Borden. And there was this discussion about whether there should be Academy Awards for stunts, because it's sort of the one department that doesn't have any awards. And in my naivete, being a stunt person for 30 minutes, I said, that would be amazing, because the things that you do, Chuck, are just so incredible and it deserves recognition. And he cut me off. He said, no, it's the worst idea I've ever heard. And I said, why? And he said, because if they give us an award for it, it stops being about telling the story, and it stops being about safety, and it becomes who can do the biggest thing to get an award. Is there a spiritual application there? Is it about telling the story and creating a safe environment? Or is it about getting an award? About the cameras turning to me? That has really affected my thinking in a lot of areas of life, that conversation with Chuck. Just to be clear, it's not this Chuck. He is a wonderful musician and a wonderful painter and a wonderful mentor, but I've never seen him jump off a building.
The last name of Chuck?
Borden, Chuck Borden.
I've heard that next Oscars there would be an award for stunts.
Yeah. Now, this conversation was about 15 or 20 years ago, but yeah, I think it's a mistake based on that conversation with Chuck. So how do we look out for one another? How do we care for one another? How do we put the needs of others ahead of our own need to get rewards? You know, as artists, we believe that we think outside of the box. In that scene, my character was in a box. As artists, we think we are outside of the box, but I don't think that's always true. I think that we create our own box and then stay in that box. We may not be in the box that the world has created, but then we create our own box and we stay in that box. It's so easy for us to see someone that is in danger, someone that's going off the path, someone that is seeking the cameras, and go, you should step away from that without stepping into the story with them. Community is more than coffees. It's more than going and watching films together. It's even more than collaborating on a piece of art together. Community is being responsible for one another, building one another up, encouraging one another. And when you see that a brother or sister are in danger, you go and rescue them to the best of your ability and as much as they will allow you. You point them back to the light instead of the cameras. I won't make you raise your hands, but I know as myself as an artist, I can give way to melancholy. I can give way to sadness and depression. Brian said he was addicted to sad songs. I literally have a playlist called Melancholy Depression Playlist. Because I don't want to be bothered to have to look them up when I feel like hearing those sad songs. The first song on it is Desperado, in case you're curious. Are we willing to step into other people's scenes, even if it puts us in danger? Now, be careful. You don't want to fall into the same sin that they're falling into, right? There's groupthink. In that box that Brian showed us yesterday, there was relational, right? That affects all the other boxes. The type of people you hang around will affect you. Scripture says that bad company corrupts good morals. So are you going to be an influence or are you going to be influenced? Those are the times when God calls you to be a first assistant director. I have worked with some actors who are quite well known, and they love being part of a team. You may not know her, but Morgan Fairchild was a very well-known, beautiful actress. And she always played sort of ditzy, dumb blondes on television. One of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life. And she was well-known and well-respected. And she could have been one of those actors who went to her trailer and didn't interact with anyone. But instead, she would come to karaoke with us after. And I sang Elvis songs with Morgan Fairchild at karaoke because she wanted to be part of a team. There's other people that I've worked with, I won't say their names, but they had a way higher opinion of themselves than they should have for being a soap opera star. And they wouldn't let anyone but the director speak to them. Do you want to be part of a team? Even if your work requires you to paint or sculpt or lock away to do a composition of music for months on end by yourself because God is speaking to you and you're doing that art, do you still want to be part of a team? This is your team. And I said the other day, you can leave this conference and go back into isolation, and you will be more depressed than you were before because you have tasted community. Or you can keep these relationships alive and feed off one another's creativity, feed off one another's imagination, feed off each other's faith, so that your role can grow. So what can we do to actively build a stronger creative community around us rather than working in isolation? And how do we avoid a heart of competition? Yeah, so to summarize for the camera, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Get to know people, because it's much easier to judge people, and I'm just summarizing. It's much easier to judge people from afar than it is when you're sitting with them and you know them. And you learn to understand their heart. That's very good. Anyone else? One way, she said, one way that we avoid competition is to be secure in who we are in our identity. And if your identity is in Jesus Christ, then there's no need to compete. If we're willing to listen, yeah, instead of just give. That's amazing. Oh, here's our summary. So we want to seek unity of purpose under Christ. We want to seek his authority and order under Christ, and that includes the people that he puts in place. And we want to seek community in Christ. All right, here's the question I want you to ponder. We're not going to talk about it for time reasons, but I want you to sort of jot down what you need to jot down to think about this question before you leave. As we leave this set and step back into our own scenes, how can we continue to collaborate in God's greater masterpiece, supporting one another as cast and crew and in his story? I want you to pray about that, not just come up with an answer. Pray about it before you leave this place.